Welcome back, everybody, to some more Monday Madness, the Porsche Masters Cup Round 3 at Kyalami. I return home, of course, as a South African that's moved to the UK. We go back to Kyalami in South Africa for what is the home of Porsche Motorsport South Africa, the Kyalami circuit. And as you can see from the visuals, I've had my wish granted. It is raining outside the commentary box. My name is George G. Mac Smith, and joining me in the commentary booth today, Ryan Mawson. How are you doing, Ryan?
Yes, hello George, hello everyone else. Not too bad. We're going to be an interesting one on this rainy day at Kyalami. Not uncommon for this area of the world, I'm sure. Definitely going to put some of the drivers to the test in the Cup cars. No traction control here to save you, and with the engine hanging out the rear on the Cup and the GT3s, it's definitely going to add some interesting handling characteristics around some of these corners.
Oh, it is going to be a goodie. I mean, what is already a difficult circuit technically is going to have a little bit more of that difficulty ramped up as the rain comes down. And the fact that we've got Porsches here, I'm no liar. I like to tell people that this is my favorite manufacturer and this is my favorite series that we are commentating on here for Racing Club International in partnership with Race Department, AK Informatica, Race Face Speed Labs, and Sim Racing GP. Just under 2 minutes remaining for our drivers here to get their last bits of practice in. And then we go to a rather special qualifying session. It's a 30-minute session, but it's split up into 10-minute segments, starting out with the GT4 cars. They get 10 minutes. Then it goes to the Cup cars. Then it goes to the GT3s. So that means we've got 3 classes of cars all racing on the same circuit at the same time as we look at Kyalami coming around in his Cayman, putting some pressure onto one of the GT3s. I think this is going to be wet and wild, Ryan.
Absolutely. I couldn't get any more wet and wild. It'd be very interesting to see what happens with the class of overlay as well. Usually, we sort of expect the cars, there'd be a little bit of overlay between the Cups and the GT3s, but now they're in the wet. How are they going to fare in the race? Often the Porsche happens when you put fuel in it. It is a little bit better though, so we might actually see some faster times when they've had a dry line form and they've got some fuel on board.
Very, very true. Of course, that fuel tank being at the front then just gives a little bit more weight balance coming out, makes it a little bit less twitchy towards the rear. But if any circuit is going to test out the gear handling characteristics of these Porsches, Kyalami is going to be just that. We're talking about it together before we went live. This corner that we're looking at now, Cheetah, infamous for causing havoc and creating some unruly events if you time it wrong and hit that inside apex. But the entire track just flowy and great and pretty narrow in terms of overtaking, so all about the pressure being put onto the cars in front of you.
Especially when you have to move off that slightly drier line to overtake, it makes it even that much a little bit harder, especially in the Porsches where they are very, very prone for weight change. If you want to throw a Porsche around, you're changing the weight distribution of the car a lot, and that rearwards engine on the GT3s and the Cups really will want to bite you. It's slightly safer in the GT4s, the Cayman being more of a mid-engine car, but it still has its own little handling foibles with the rear axle, and the differentials like to cause problems if you yam on the brakes too hard.
You were explaining that to me before we went live. I haven't spent a lot of time driving out in the GT4 Cayman, but it will be interesting to see how these drivers all adapt to the conditions. Of course, we were warned from the weatherman that we had the probability of getting a bit of rain coming down, and I think that drivers have probably been setting themselves up to expect the rain, and practice has failed to disappoint when it comes to that. I like the changes in weather. I think it really tests drivers to their limits. And Corentin Burgess here in that 666, currently just sitting at the top in free practice, 146.5 coming down. So it does just show you that the track is pretty wet. Lower 140s in the GT3s, normally where drivers are aiming to get to. But as practice comes to an end, Ryan, going over to quali, maybe we see a little bit of a change in condition. I don't expect it though.
No, I don't expect it either. What I do expect, though, by the time quali has ended, you might have just the faintest part of a dry line, which means that probably the GT3 class are going to be edging down towards those sort of mid 140 times. But it's extra difficult for the first people going out, which will be the GT4 class. Slowest class on the field, but they still have their own problems to deal with.
Very true indeed. And there we go. Qualifying underway. First 10 minutes of this 30-minute session being dedicated out to the GT4s. And Ty Jolly in that 332 is going to be out on the circuit. Quite a couple of car lengths ahead of his nearest rival in that number 69. So he's given himself a good bit of clean air to get out. But at the same time, he's now almost the, not the snow plow, but the water plow in terms of starting to form up the dry line. And you mentioned it, coming down to the GT3s, they're going to get onto the track at its driest with the dry line forming up. But it is coming down pretty hot.
Yeah, and looking on the forecast, we don't see anything to change really. I mean, in the next 10 to 30 minutes, it's just going to continue with the light rain. So yeah, it might get a little bit of a dry line, but we'll see what happens. The GT4s, yeah, should clear a little bit of the water away, and we'll see how they're fare. Coming down corners like this through mineshaft, this left-hander, you've got to be so tentative on the steering. The car really wants to loop around there in these wet conditions, and obviously these runoff curbs coming up to Cheetah, they are big and wide. You think you can take them, but my god, the painted surfaces are slick in these conditions.
An interesting fact about the drainage system at Kyalami, of course, quite modern and good at dispersing water off of the surface, but you still got to be careful of standing water and puddles forming up, especially coming down through mineshaft on that left-hander. As we jump on board with Ty Jolly, and we'll get a little onboard lap out through turn 1, known as the kink, on the approach down to the left-hander of Crowthorne. And you have to get onto the anchors, look for the inside apex, and then sort of square off back into the middle of the circuit and hit both of the inside apexes coming through the Yuxke sweep, and then the left-hander of Barbecue, as Ty Jolly makes that look like it's a bit of a dry line already, and it certainly isn't, but he's doing a good job at making it look so. He runs down to the right-hander of Sunset. No sunset in sight, no sun in sight, as the right-hander here can also be pretty difficult. A little bit off camber as well. Then the left-hander of Clubhouse. Also, got to be careful not to upset yourself on that inside curb. Ty Jolly does a good job at just correcting that on the wheel, as we saw. And then the fast S's with the approach up to the top of the hill. Got to be careful, again, not to mess up the line onto the inside, upset the car. And Ty Jolly doing a good job as he approaches the top of the hill. Very blind braking zone for the hairpin, also known as Leeukorp. Missed the braking point slightly there, went a bit wide off of the drying line, but managed to come around. 2 lines can be used there to overtake regardless. And now Ty Jolly down through that fast left-hander down the hill through a mine shaft, coming up to Crocodile, the right-hander, back on the brakes, look for the inside apex, try and extend your line as much as possible and get onto the gas, go straight, and the infamous cheetah corner. Missed that inside sausage curb, and very wide onto the grass as well. Ty Jolly does a good job to wrestle that back, and in the final corner, Ingwe, the left-hander, very tight and in its own right, but gives you a good run down to the line, and Ty Jolly will be coming up to the timing line now, but unfortunately invalidated his lap, so he's going to have to give it another shot.
Yes, but we do see what will be the first provisional pole. Andy Broadman with a 156.3. That is the time to beat in the GT4 class, and is immediately knocked off by Charisma, 156.1. So just a mere 0.2 off the pace as the rest of the field start to filter through. We can see the times all about 1.5 to 1.6 seconds off pace currently, but I expect those times to really start tumbling as the track just gets better and better.
This is the perfect opportunity for the drivers in the GT3 class and the Cup Car class to try and snitch themselves a victory. As just a reminder that Cody Pride in the GT3 class, he's currently leading the GT3s. He is out of the race, or signed out for this one. And then, of course, the Cup Car class, Joe McCauley, who's just been having an insane amount of good times out in that Cup Car. He's going to be out for this, but we've still got some interesting and big names here. Looking through the field, luckily, most of the GT4 drivers managing to make it out here to Kyalami, but it is Nico Kuizma who sits then at the top of the timing sheet in the GT4s. Zoe Tang in that 171, 2.5 seconds off the pace for their banker lap, and looking to find a little bit more time here at Kyalami.
Yes, with Tang going up, looking in the correct way with the delta, up 0.4, coming up to the top of the hairpin. If they can hold it all the way down mineshaft and through the infamous cheetah. Car going off ahead, you don't really want to see that. You can just about use the slipstream coming down mineshaft.
Just wrestling themselves around and making sure that they can improve their times. I mean, 10 minutes of quali is not a long time. We see one of the other Caymans off track there. You mentioned how dangerous it can be running wide coming out of Crocodile, and one of the victims already claimed up. Then you've got to get back on the racing circuit, let the people coming past to set their flying laps before you go and attempt it again. Zoe Tang then on the drag down to the line, currently sitting in P7 in class, will jump up to P5. A 157.645 comes out, and 1.5 seconds behind the number 7 in pole.
Yeah, the number 7 looking very comfortable in these early stages. 3 minutes left to go in the GT4 qualifying, and then we will swap over to the Cups. So realistically, a lot of these drivers are only going to maybe have one flyer left if you're halfway around your current lap. Nico Kuizma actually trending up at the minute through sunset. As you said, no sun in sight. You got to make sure you don't run out wide onto the painted surfaces. That will really upset the car with how slick they are. But still just about keeping the 0.2 of a second up coming into the S's.
I love the splitter cam that our camera director, Ryan Gill, has selected for us, especially on the run through the S's to the top of Leeuwkop.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a brilliant camera view. You can really judge the sense. Even though these are the slowest class, the GT4 class, they are really going through some speed with these wets. Obviously, these cars are a little bit easier to drive than your Cups and maybe your GT3s. They all do still have the traction control and the ABS, and a little bit of downforce, which is something that the Cup category sort of wishes they had. But once again, actually Nico Kuizma managing to keep that 0.2 improvement, so it's looking like a good time, gliding it through crocodiles, sliding through cheetah even, I beg my pardon, through the puddle at the bottom. And will they hold on to it? There's now a drag race to the line. We'll see if they improve that time. This could be a 55, possibly.
No. Just outside of it, though, 156.094 coming out, 900ths away from getting into those 155s. I mean, that's a good time coming down, considering Andy Boardman is 2/10ths off the pace. And Nico Kuizma doing a good job to just get themselves towards the front of their class start. And of course, the GT4s will start right at the back of the field once everybody has done their qualifying. And, for them, they've got to make sure that they avoid any of the chaos that comes through. A good point that you raised, Ryan, is the fact that those GT3 Cup cars don't have the traction control assistance that the GT3 cars have. So that is going to be wild in these wet conditions. Just absolutely wild.
Absolutely, and you've got to be in a Cup car, you've got to be especially careful for the puddles that we see. And you mentioned earlier, Kyalami has some of the great drainage systems, thought to be expected with these great South African rainstorms. But you do get the odd puddle running across the circuit, especially into the last sector. The last corner has a lovely puddle that runs across it, and that can catch you out sometimes if you put the power too early on in a Cup car. So they've got to be careful right up until a dry line starts from. But we can see Andrew Pike fighting at the wheel through the S's, just about managing to keep it on. Even with the assists, this is still not easy conditions to drive in.
Andrew Pike looking good on the timing delta as well. Currently finds himself without a lap time set up, and there's only 10 seconds left of this qualifying session for the GT4s. The guys out on track will be wrapping up their laps if they are out on them, and Andrew Pike needs to have a good lap coming in here. The number 57 for OTL Racing coming into Crocodiles, wrestling it round the right-hander, using as much as the racing circuit as he is permitted, keeps the car between the lines. Now it's just Cheetah to deal with, and he looked smooth and steady dealing with that sausage curb on the inside. There was one of those puddles getting kicked up before coming into the braking zone of Ingwe, and the number 57 now on the dash down to the line. Where does this time put Andrew Pike on the board, I wonder? And it will put him up into P5, immediately knocked down to P6 by Gleason. So a good showing for Pike, even though he didn't have a timing sheet on the line. And now we start to see the Cup cars out, and they begin their 10-minute qualifying session, Ryan.
Absolutely, and first out of the pits in these conditions seems to be Mark Whitford for the FF Racing in these 86. The driver that I've often known is in the World Tour as well, in our team, Open Visor Racing Club. No stranger to Cup cars, or cars that are difficult to control, so we'll see what he can do in the sort of pouring down conditions. As you can see, an ever so slight faint dry line, but it's really not really drying up at all. It does look on the weather like it might decrease, but definitely not at the end of quali.
I mean, these Cup cars, these are the car class that you pick up to just play life on hard mode, really, because they are such difficult things to drive, but so much fun at the same time. And this little play on the traditional Cup car races that we run at a Racing Club International then includes all the other series of cars as well. In the background, we see one of the Cup cars not dealing well with Cheetah, and we predicted that it might happen. We'll jump on board again for a on-board lap with Mark Whitford, this time in the Cup car class. The number 86 will lead us away, and we'll get to see if there's anything different to what we saw in the Caymans in the same sort of setting. So down into the left-hand of turn 2 of Crowthorne, makes his way through the Yuxke sweep. And these cars, of course, you've got to be very gentle on how you apply that right foot for the throttle, especially in the wet conditions. Those curbs can become so slippery. But a good exit out of Barbecue and the run down to the right-hander of Sunset. This is where I expect things to get a little bit wild, if anything, because it's a little bit off camber. It's a difficult medium to fast speed right-hander, and Mark Whitford doesn't make it look that way at all. The runoff for the Exeter Clubhouse also making it look like the curbs are just not too slippery. The S's can also be quite upsetting with the weight transfer of the cars, but Whitford showing us why, Ryan, you said he is very used to the Cup car races, very planted, very stable on the run up to the left-hander for Leeuwcorp, the hairpin, and you can just see that wet patch on the inside line there, but immediately drifts out to the right-hand exit of the apex and making use of that forming up dry line again. A little bit of a correction on the wheel coming through Mineshaft. Felt the back getting a little bit loose. Misses the inside apex for the right-hander of the Crocodiles, but immediately corrects it back onto the power once again. A little bit of inside sausage curb kicked up through Cheetah, and then the braking left-hander of Ingwe coming through. So Mark Whitford in the number 86 FF Racing team going to be setting our benchmark time in the Cup car class, and he sets a 1:49.1, and it will be Ertan to slot himself in 2/10 behind.
And we see the 888 of James Parker has immediately gone and set our what will be provisional pole at a 1:48.5. James Parker, also another driver that I expected to see in the Cup category, doing very well, even though, yeah, these conditions just doesn't really phase these type of drivers. Especially, like I said, if you pick the Cup car, you didn't really pick it for the easy ride, did you? You wanted something that is a little bit scary. So 3/10 gap to Gulia and sort of 6/10, 7/10 gap to the rest of the field. But we will see what happens as the track gets a little bit better. You can see James Parker sliding it through Sunset, just about keeping that car pointed in the right direction. And this is another driver I expect to see a fairly good time out of, Michael Sundstrom, for the nearly on pace in the 899 car. currently only just come out of the pits, possibly a slight tire pressure change or something like that. But yeah, we'll see what they can do after their outlap.
Oh, big oversteering moments on the exit of Barbecue. We just get to see how drifty boy these Cup cars can become. And you talked about it, James Parker, one of the drivers that we certainly love to see in the Cup car series of this Porsche Masters Cup, along with Mike Noble and of course Joe McCauley, who won't be here tonight, but hopefully we still get a nice little knife fight coming out. Previously, James Parker hasn't had the best starts into the races for the season. He's unfortunately had some early incidents that have put him in a place that he wasn't really featuring high up. In the first race at Paul Ricard, I remember he had a disconnect once he was in the lead of the race, and then at Donington he didn't have too much luck getting collected in some of the chaos that ensued in that race. So looking to see James Parker show us what he's got out on the circuit. And talking about the man who knows the Cup cars as well as I like to familiarize myself with him. I mean, this guy has always blown my mind when it comes to his driving style, and the Cup car races have always showed. And he goes pole 148.015, almost half a second quicker than Parker goes Mike Noble in the FFS Racing 123, and the color scheme does not disappoint. Very Mike Noble-esque. I'm a big fan of the purple rims.
Yeah, there are two sort of givens with Mike Noble. One, he'll be fast in a sort of sketchy as car like the Porsche Cups, and two, the color scheme will always be outlandish, even if he's driving such things as a Lexus, which we cannot change the liveries of in ACC. You'll be able to tell the Mike Noble car because it will have pink luminous wheels, and it's like, ah yes, that is their team.
Very very keen on showing us that he likes his color matching abilities, but now I think I said that a bit sarcastically, to be honest. He likes to do contrasting colors, bright outlandish rims, and sometimes a little bit boring on terms of the livery colors, but other times bright and colorful. It keeps us on our toes. But Mike Noble, a talented driver at that, goes first in class for the Cup cars. Mikkel Sandstrom still trying to get a lap in that 899. We saw him coming out of the pits. I wonder if he was the Cup car that perhaps got yeeted off at the back end of Cheetah. Has Parker now coming towards the line? Is he going to better his lap time?
That it will be a 148.294, but just about 2/10 off provisional pole. Still time in it though. All these Cup cars will have at least one more lap left after this lap.
Yes, they will indeed. And then we go over to the GT3 qualifying, as these guys just have 2 minutes to get their last laps in. And the GT3s come out, and then we're done with quali. Oh, Mikkel Sandstrom in through the danger zone of Cheetah, manages to keep it to it between the lines, but will have lost a lot of delta time. And just correcting the way that he is coming out, the nearly on pace 899 comes across the line, 2.4 seconds off the pace, 150.475 coming in, but certainly some time to be found. We saw how much they've been struggling with that rear end, especially in the wet conditions.
Yeah, absolutely. Back to Mark Whitford, the 86 FF Racing, trending up as well at the minute. Around about 3/10 up at the top of the hairpin. Now, if you remember, we saw Mark Whitford, where his time was lost originally, was at the bottom of Mineshaft. So we will see what happens to his delta as he comes through this corner. Slight drift on the exit. And can he get it stopped for the apex? Absolutely. Using the run out. Very, very slippery on that. Might have been just a smidge too far, but it will be a dash to the line with a minute to go, if it will be an invalid lap.
I think missing that apex just slightly on Crocodile again, that's certainly a place that he can make some time up. But regardless, over the line, Whitford will go, and I think that was a 148.837, but was invalidated. So it needs to try and get that one. He had 30 seconds before, well, once he crossed the line, he'll be able to finish this lap out ahead of the GT3 class quali beginning.
Yeah, and everyone will be just dashing to the line, I believe. The 2:31 will be our last lap time setter, which will be the Killian Ryan Meenan car. So all of these drivers that are currently on, they will be their last laps to do. James Parker just sort of holding his time at the minute through Sector 1, through Sunset again. As we said before, very difficult corner, especially when you want to run out to the rumble strip, but you just know that it is so slick over there. Big drift coming out of the left-hander of Clubhouse. Hopefully that won't have hurt the Delta too much.
I'm such a biased person towards both Porsches and drifting, and the Cup cars give me a taste of both, especially in the wet conditions. And I often do sound like an owl in the background here. Ooh, going off as we see these guys getting the control of that rear end. But James Parker trying to chase down, trying to get to the pole sitting position in his class. He'll be battling it out with Mike Noble, and the two of them have some good banter as well in the chats outside of the circuit. So always good to see them throwing it down. I mean, the two of them just showing why they are so good in these Cup cars. James Parker with a lot of curb coming out of Cheetah there, uses the grass as well, but manages to keep the car pointed in the right direction. And can James Parker beat Mike Noble? 2/10 off the pace on the dash down to the line, and he'll stay 2/10 behind, but does better his lap time, 1:48.237 coming out for the 888 Coach Dave Academy car.
As everyone else sort of filters back through, that will be some of the last setters, and now we see the GT3s out for the start of their qualifying. As we mentioned earlier, you can see that we thought it might happen, a tiny dry line has started to form, which will help better these cars. These will be sort of the most capable cars in the wet, if you will. They've got the most downforce. Traction control systems on the Porsche has TC2, so it's especially advanced traction control system. Very, you could really tailor it to how you want to drive the car. And yeah, more downforce, bigger, better tires, and much more advanced electronics. We will ride on with Olefe, who will be the first to give our provisional pole.
So Olaf Leffe coming down to the braking zone for the left-hander. And it's always nice to see the different onboards from the different perspectives of the classes. And I love Ryan's technical details that he brings into the broadcast as well, just explaining those nuances between the different classes. And the GT3 Cup car versus the GT3 car, completely different beasts when it comes down to the technical sheets. Even if you look at them from the outside, they have the same similarities in terms of the shape. I mean, I'm a Porsche fanboy, and even I can admit that it's difficult to tell different types of Porsches apart sometimes. But if you go in closer, you'll start to see, like you said, Ryan, slight differences in their aero. And these are all about that big grip, the traction control systems, the advanced electronics, all making them just that little bit different to what the Cup car guys are going through. And of course, a stiffer suspension model as well to help them handle through. They need to be careful though of the curbs and getting upset by them. So where you might be allowed a little bit more curbing coming out in the Cup car, the GT3 car will be stiffer, will send you to a place you don't want to go. And we just see a little correction coming out of a mine shaft there to the wheel. So Olaf Leffe comes into the braking zone for the Crocodiles, onto the accelerator pedal again. And this will be the final two corners to see where our GT3 car class comes up. And the 308 into the braking zone then for the left-hander of Ingwe. You can just see a little bit more planted, a little bit more stable as they make the run down to the timing line. Olaf Leffe with a 1:46.8 coming out there as Shinov immediately bested. He goes up with a 1:46.653. Hellman is in there in P3 temporarily as for sure comes through. Burgess will top the timing sheet in that 666, a 1:46.080. Very close to getting into the 1:45s. And I think those times might even drop slightly more. They've got 5 minutes of quali remaining, so if it's time, this is the time to do so.
Yeah, we saw it in practice, I believe, with a high 1:45. But that was, you've got so many cars running around on the track, and that really dries out the track, despite the slightly heavier rain that we had in practice. But in the race pace, I do expect to see some of these cars dip into the 45s as the track dries out. And yeah, as we said earlier, Porsche's hard to tell them apart sometimes, but what I find interesting as well, a lot of people, when they look at these when you explain to them the Cup and the GT4 and the GT3 class, a lot of people assume, oh, well, the GT3 must have the most power then. Actually not. The Cup has the most power out of all of the Porsches, and the Cup car is the fastest in a straight line, but it just doesn't have the brakes, the downforce, or the traction control systems that the GT3 cars have, and that is where the time is slower. I mean, a lot of the great GT3 drivers have come up through Porsche Cup, and they always say, if you can drive a GT3, if you can drive a Porsche Cup on the limit, you can drive a GT3 on the limit, because they're actually a little bit easier sometimes.
Yeah, I like that explanation of it. And the difference in power, of course, is something that people find a little bit misleading. So it's always good to just inform our viewers on those technical details. It's so good to have all these Porsche classes out on the circuit. And of course, for me, returning home to my home circuit of Kyalami, that's always a good treat when it comes to Racing Club International. I was a fan of the season before I even saw that this was part of the calendar, and when I saw that this is where we'd be tonight, I just had a big smile on my face as Sebastian Luigi Vita in the 221 jumps up to P3, a 146.605 or 146.08. No, I got it all wrong. He goes 5 tenths behind the pace, so still not into the 145s. I thought we had got into the 145s in my head, but we might have to wait for the race conditions for that to happen here.
Yes, possibly. Looking through the field, our current provisional pole setter anyway of Burgess just about holding Delta at the minute, not really gaining or losing. This man though, Benjamin Heilman, he is trending up in the right direction, which could end up, if there is any more time left in this lap, a new pole setter. We're up 0.4 of a second coming into the top hairpin. Keeps it nice and tight. The wet part of the inside of that hairpin slowly drying out. You can see there's a lot more that now you can take going down mineshaft. You've got to be careful with that slight puddle that runs across the track. Very easy to upset the car. Braking late, very, very late on the brakes in the Porsche, and probably one of the best brakes in the GT3 field is the Porsche. How late you can brake versus some of the other cars is absolutely incredible. Through, big twitch through Cheetah, and up to the final corner. Might have hurt the Delta ever so slightly. There might be a little bit more time in that lap yet as we have an absolute dash up to the line. It will be a better improvement, but it will not be enough for pole yet at 146.287.
Benjamin Heilman has been putting in the time and effort for sure coming into this race. The pace coming out from that number 24 certainly showing that there has been some good improvements coming down. Sebastian Luigi Vita also bettering their time at 146.458 coming down. 2 minutes left to quali on the clock, so all these drivers now will be trying to get their final laps in to see how this grid will start out. But with a 75-minute race ahead, it's anybody's game. It's all about a good start. It's all about a good opening couple of laps as well. And with all these car classes out here, if the rain continues to come down, it will all be about managing those overtake opportunities when they present themselves, because there won't be a lot of them on the circuit if the drivers in front of you are doing the right thing at the right time. Putting pressure, bullying them into mistakes will be the name of the game. And just keeping that consistency up there. Consistency wins championships, and consistency wins races.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of the times in the wet, that is a little bit hard to do if you've got someone filling your mirrors with their headlights of their Porsche as well. If you just sort of take your eyes off the road for a minute, you just have the slightest twitch, any sort of problem, and you go wide, that will be the moment to pounce. And it is very easy to do, especially around here. There's a lot of runoff where you think that going over there will gain you time, but if you upset one of these Porsches, they will bite you. They are not afraid, these cars, to chew you up and spit you out.
They are not, and being brave on the brakes in the background, we see coming out a little bit too late out of Cheetah, one of the cars running wide left, going to return to the pits. I assume that was the 308 that did it. But Jordan for sure takes pole then with a 146.077 coming out, just 3 thousandths of a second quicker than Burgess. Corentin Burgess thought that lap was good enough to stay up there, but Jordan for sure coming out and just showing us that there's always time to be found, especially on the last lap. This is essentially where you'd probably have the most grip with all these cars starting to form that dry line up. 20 seconds left on the clock. A couple of cars going to get themselves over the line to set up a additional lap. Alan Knight in that 970, jumping up to 8th place. Antonio Ceretti in 7th, looking to see if they can improve their time. They'll get this last lap as the exit of barbecue is done and dusted. And a couple of drivers jumping to the pits, but the drivers out on track will be finishing these laps off and hopefully improving their positions.
Yeah, I do expect to see a little bit of a shake-up. Adam Banfield, currently the number 3 EBM, he is trending up once again, another half a second. So once again, that will really put him up into the fight for the top pack. Speaking of top pack, we've got first, second, and third all separated by less than a 1/10 of a second. All those drivers still out on track trying to better their times. Ho, ho, ho. Round we go.
And we expected Cheetah to pick up some victims. And in the same shot, we saw Benjamin Heilman also running out wide. Adam Banfield then coming towards the line out through Cheetah, making that look a lot cleaner than what we just saw on the replay cams, as he now makes his way to the line. I love this livery in ACC, one of my absolute favorites. And he comes to the line, jumps himself up to P6, 146.389 coming out, and the little celebratory wiggle as he goes through the sweep, or sorry, the kink.
Yep, so that about does it. We thought we might see a 145, but obviously just the conditions currently are not being pleasing enough for them. But as we says, we saw the 145 in practice, so I'm not going to put it past these drivers in the race as soon as there is a little bit more of a drier line. In each qualifying session that we had, we only had that one class running around. By the time you've got all the cars on track, it will be a much different story.
It is going to be chaos indeed. Maybe a bit of controlled chaos, but it's going to be chaos nonetheless. Hopefully all the drivers putting their best foot forward and making sure we have a good start to this race. Looking forward to just seeing where things are, and we have the standings to bring to you guys as well before we go into the start of this race. So Cody Pride in the GT3 Cup Car Pro class, the GT3 Pro class sits at the top of the leaderboard with 137 points. Won't be racing in this race, which gives opportunities out to other drivers. There's a couple of sign-outs. I'm not quite, I don't have all of them on hand, but we know that Alexander Shinoff then sits in second place with 98 points. Jules Sky in third with 92 points. Jordan Fisher on 88 points in fourth, just 1 point ahead of Adam Banfield in fifth on 87 points. Fifth for Olaf Leffer, sixth for Olaf Leffer, seventh for Antonio Ceretti, eighth for Corentin Burgess, ninth for Sebastian Luigi Vita, and 10th place Lucas Rommel, then rounding out the top 10. In 11th place, Emil Stanchow on 53 points, 12th for Panos Karatis, 13th for Alan Knight, 14th sits Benjamin Heilman, 15th Dominic Alvarez, and in 16th Jack Young. Then in the Cup cars, the Pro class, Joe McCauley, who won't be racing tonight, on 141 points. Second place, Alexander Karsten on 111. Mikkel Sandström in that 899 sits on 92 points. And third, Mike Noble in fourth place on 87 points. Killian Ryan Meenan in fifth. Jesperi Helikalio in sixth place. Arteberg Ertan in seventh. Atakan Akar in eighth. Mark Whitford sits in ninth, and Gergo Panker rounding out the top 10. 11th sits Alexander Guglia on 48 points. 12th for James Parker. Like I said, hasn't had the greatest of finishes coming into the series, but looking to change that up here. Kyalami in 13th, Chris Rubila, and rounding out the 14th position, Wojtek Lukasek in 14th place with 23 points. And that's the Cup Car Pro Division. Looking towards the GT4s, you got Andrew Pike sitting in first place with 126 points, tied up with Andy Boardman. So the two of them fighting it out for the championship. In third place, Matthew Kingston Lee on 97 points, just 1 point ahead of Thomas Baranowski on 96. Fifth place, Nico Charisma on 92. Sixth is Joe Gleason. Seventh sits Stefan van Alken. Eighth is Vincent Valentine. Ninth, Michael Redford. And rounding out the top 10, Ty Jolly on 55 points. Sitting in 11th place, Paul Reynolds on 51 points. Phil Webb in position at 12 with 46 points. Michael Jacobson in 13th. Zoe Tang in 14th. 15th is Michael Tuzebek. 16th is Victor Vonda. And 17th is Kyle Heidemann, who has 0 points in the championship.
And we swap back to the grid, and if my eyes are not deceiving me, I'm going to have to run my glasses here. That is a very dry track.
That is a very dry track, and, they say that the weather in South Africa is unpredictable, and this is no uncertain difference coming in. So we saw a wet practice session, a wet qualifying session, and now a cloudy and grey day for the race. And that is going to throw a little span in the works for those that were expecting it to be raining down. And for those that did not enjoy the wet conditions, maybe a slight smile as they start this race in the dry, Ryan.
I'm sure some of the Cup drivers will be sort of having more of a smile than they were in qualifying now with these better conditions. Optimum track as well, so it really has dried up fast. But we'll have to keep our eyes out from the comms box looking over to Cape Town. Usually if you see clouds forming over there, they might make their way over to the circuit. 28 degrees C, so not exactly blistering hot, but also not the coldest thing in the world, and a small breeze, 3 kilometers, could just bring a little bit of rain towards the end of the race, possibly. We only have the forecast for the next half an hour, so we'll have to keep an eye on that to see what's going to happen with the weather.
Ryan has his telescope out as he looks to Cape Town for the weather predictions, and I think that's as accurate as most of the weathermen's job is, actually. I always joke with people in saying that predicting the weather seems like the least stressful job in the world, because if you get it wrong, people just accept that, the weather changes. So maybe in my next life, I want to go for something like weatherman, and I'm sure I've offended all the weather people out in the real world to graft it out to try and expect what these changing conditions are like. But I would still change in my job any day of the week to go for weatherman. Ryan, what about you?
Well, you could work for the BBC. I mean, they often, it's like, welcome to the weather forecast, and it has a good chance of being wrong. Generally, anytime I want to do something, I think I will go wash my car. So therefore, ladies and gentlemen of the world, if Ryan Mawson thinks that he is going to wash his car, take your laundry in, because it will rain anytime I step outside with the bucket.
Well, Ryan, could you go wash your car outside now so we can get a bit of a bit of rain down for the race? 3 seconds until we begin our formation lap. And a rolling start, of course, will run us down into what will then be an hour and 15 minutes worth of racing.
An hour and 15, a long old time as well in these Porsches when you've got to battle them through. Definitely going to be a bit sore on the old arms, especially in the people with the Cup category. They've got sort of the most work to do keeping that car on the road, even in the dry conditions. You can still spin them up very easily because, I mean, like we said, the people in the GT3 categories, the GT4 categories, they just turn the traction control down a little bit, get a little bit of extra speed. In the Cup car, you look down and there is no option for that. You just have off.
That is unfortunately just the nature of those Cup cars. I do just want people to be able to identify the differences in the classes. Of course, those Caymans towards the back, the smaller wings, and the different shape to the Cups and the GT3s. The Cup cars have that front set of headlights on the front of them, just between the main headlights on the front splitter, well, not really the splitter, on the front parts of the body kits. And then the big GT3s here, slightly wider, bigger wings, a lot more aero in fact. But as they get mixed up throughout the field, we'll have to keep our eye out to see what we can track. But Mike Noble starts on pole in that Cup car, just ahead of James Parker. So looking forward to seeing those two battle it out, and Killian Ryan Meenan just behind them, making for an epic three-way battle as they make their way out through the left-hander of Clubhouse. Just a nice, slow, casual, leisurely stroll out in their beasts before the green flags wave down and we go racing, and then the pressure starts to build up.
Yeah, you want to get the tire pressures up, get some heat in those carcasses, warm up the brakes and everything ready for the green light as you go around. As it says, a couple of sign-outs this season, so a lot of these drivers in the GT3 and the Cup categories actually, and to an extent the GT4s, it's really going to shuffle the field up, so we should expect quite a good few close battles now, even going to the rest of the season. But it will be Jordan for sure leading the train, leading the front of the whole pack in his GT3 car as they start lining up 2x2 coming down mineshaft for the start of the 1 hour 15-minute race at Kyalami.
That is it, Ryan. We are here for the Porsche Masters Cup. Round 3, Kyalami is about to get underway, and I couldn't be more excited to see how this one pans out. Like you said, lots of points up for grabs. My name is George Smith in the box with Ryan Mawson, and of course Ryan Rai Gill on the cameras, bringing you all the racing action. We are Racing Club International in partnership with Race Department, AK Informatica, Raceface Speed Labs, and Sim Racing GP. You can follow us on all our Discord, socials, and timings if you use those commands in the chat. A big shout out to all you guys watching from wherever you are in the world. We appreciate the love, we appreciate the support, and the final corner of Ingwe as our drivers approach the line, waiting for the green flag. And we're about to go racing for an epic 1 hour and 15 minutes of Porsche Masters madness. I like to call it the Monday madness. Hopefully not too much of that, as we need a clean start to have a good race. And green, 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 we are go, as for sure lines up alongside Burgess. The dash down to the line. You want the inside line coming into the left-hander, and just look how many Porsches are in the background there. Round the outside, Quarantine Burgess a little bit deep coming through. Looks like for sure going to just stay ahead, as Heilman has a great start coming out. He jumps himself up into P3. Banfield also following Heilman through there, bullying Vita off the line, but Heilman, big exit, bad exit, bits it into the wall on the exit of Barbecue, and that is going to cost him a lot of time, as he had a great start coming out, but it is not going to be the way that he would have wanted that race to start, Ryan.
No, it's such a good start getting up into the P3, but as we says, when the tire pressures are cold, you can do your best to sort of give it a little bit of heat up in the opening, the formation lap. But until these tires come up to temperatures and up to pressures, they are really quite sketchy, these cars. You've got to sort of break them in early, because you don't as well want to grain these tires. These will be the 2019 tires, so they are a little bit less prone to graining than the 2020 tires are, that we are usually sort of used to racing with the 2020 seasons. But if you do grain them, you lose so much pace. So it's a real fine balance between, you want to get positions at the start of the race, but you also want your pace to last for that whole stint.
And it will actually shuffle up the order just slightly indeed, as unfortunately it looks like it hasn't been a clean start for a couple of drivers, but for the guys up at the front, for sure, Jordan for sure in that number 11 at Prime Racing, currently sitting in P1, has a couple of car lengths out, 0.6 of a second behind is Quarantine Burgess, and then Adam Banfield. This little three-way pack has got away early on, and the pressure coming out in the midfield, looking at Antonio Soretti as he tries to take the inside line up against the likes of Vita, putting the pressure on through the Yuxke sweep, jumping over the curb just a little bit up through that sweep, but settles back in behind the likes of the 221. The pressure from the 308 of Lefe is starting to heat up as Shinov behind him in P7 just follows along in the train. And this is exactly what you need to do in this kind of a race. We said the circuit wasn't prone to too much overtaking. You've got to put pressure onto the drivers in front, force them to make the mistake, and just settle in as early as possible, as you need to kind of work together to catch up to the lead cars. And that sounds a little bit wild and crazy in racing terms, because every everybody's racing up against each other. But if you caught out early on, just battling it up, you are going to find yourself out of position early on. Ryan Meenan has gotten himself up into P2 in the Cup cars as he's putting pressure onto the likes of Mike Noble. That's P3 actually. It's Stanshell that was separating. James Parker is in P1 for the Cup cars. You see that white 888 CDA Academy car ahead of the 123 of Noble, and then Ryan Meenan right behind. Guglia is also in this, and Sundstrom keeping that pressure on. A nice train of Cup cars coming through. This is a brilliant start to the race.
Yeah, bumper to bumper, as close as you can get him, and sometimes that is sort of the worst driver to be, almost in the sense of Mike Noble. You're sandwiched in between these people, so you want to go for the move if you think that you've got the pace over the car in front of you. But anytime you go for a move, you open the door. It's just opening the door for the person behind you. You can very easily, if you can't make that move stick, lose a place to the person behind you, which, as you said earlier, sometimes it is better just to sit behind and sort of let the field spread out a little bit and then go for some moves. As we see one of the cars that did have a bit of a bad start, the 56 of Haikelo, that car's battling its way through the GT4 field, back up to sort of the back of the Cup field where they belong, and getting back to this train. Shinov, Lefe, Seredi being caught up slightly by the 970 of Knight as well. You can see just Porsche GT3s, as far as the eye can see, all nose to tail. No one relenting at this early stages.
It gives me shivers through my entire body seeing all these Porsches out on the circuit. I need to change my bias. It comes out too often, but this does bring a big smile to my Dow. Alexander Shinov up to the top of Leocorp, trying to just see where they're going to get themselves past. But you said it, as far as the eye can see, GT3's all in front, a train from behind as we look from Leffe's back wing and into the braking zone now. Shinov, getting him into the braking zone, putting that pressure on. That right-hander of Crocodile after Mineshaft is a big ballsy braking point. It allows you to just kind of really test your bravery in where you can get that car turned around, and doing a good job to close down that gap. Seredi leads off the train of Leffe, Shinov, Knight and Stanchiao, as in front Vishor leads away from Banfield and Burgess in their own little train. Banfield actually 2.5 seconds off the back end of Vishor. So for the front three, they've gotten away nice and early away from the chaos of one of these trains, and they are allowed to then kind of stretch their legs out. Here you kind of caught up. You're reacting to what other drivers do in front. If they're braking too much, you're almost in just muscle memory mode, where you're trying to just stay away from contact and not necessarily able to flex your own ability out on the circuit.
Yeah, which is when we see the drivers, each of these, getting as close as they dare, or as close as they know that the front of their Porsche is, right up under the big wings of each other. Obviously, professional drivers, you don't want to lose any time for the person in front. You want to stay as close as possible and potentially keep yourself all within the train. As Olefe looking for the inside, but once again, nothing there as of yet at the top of the hairpin. That is a good overtaking spot if you can outbrake someone. And we can see coming down into Mineshaft, a flash of the lights from Seredi in front. He's obviously saying, I'm going to go for it. It looks once again to the inside. Will the move pay off? It will, and that might be just the moment for Olefe to pounce.
This is not where you want to be. Three abreast coming down into Cheetah. That's going to cause a lot of backup coming out from Lefe. He might be overtaken coming down into the right-hander. All of these drivers giving so much space to one another. Look how beautiful that driving was coming out. That's exciting GT3 racing. And side by side, an eyelash apart down the drag of the main start-finish straight across the kink and into the braking zone of Crowthorne now. Where do these drivers tend to go? And a little bit of rubbing is racing will come out, as it looks like Lefe is going to just keep themselves ahead of Shinov. But that was a great bit of driving, and to stay that way as they came out of Cheetah. I've seen incidents happen in real life and in sim racing that do not really go down in the record book of proud moments, but this one certainly did.
Yeah, wild 3-wide moment there. Yeah, so much respect being given by the drivers, giving each other space. And yeah, it's just crazy. But that is what I mentioned earlier, is that if you go for a move sometimes and it does not pull off, as we saw that move did, everyone else will then pounce on you. As soon as the door is opened in a train this close, you can very easily be losing 1, 2, 3 positions. As we see Shinov up ahead in that 19, still trying to get around Olefe, obviously wanting the position back. And it looks like they've got the inside line going down to Mineshaft. It was not to be. The 308 of Olefe getting a slightly better drive. But yeah, I do not expect this battle to be settled anytime soon.
No, but it looks like Shinov going to keep that pressure on, knows that they can't afford to go 2-3 cars wide again. Like you said, Ryan, it's all about the cars behind you that will pounce if you do try and take an alternate line, the slower line coming through, and it has allowed the likes of Knight and Stancio to catch back up to this little train of cars led out by Seredi in that number 4. Then you've got Vita in the 221, Lef in the 308, and then this man, Alexander Shinov, in the number 19. Under pressure very soon from the likes of Knight and Stancio, but a nice little separation coming out between the GT3s and the Cup cars, as well as the GT4s, and everybody sort of in place, in class, in terms of the timing sheet on the left-hand side, as Boardman leads in the GT4 class ahead of Kursma, and Baranowski sitting in the 3rd podium spot temporarily for the GT4s, looking towards Andrew Pike here, trying to make their way up through the field. They've got Jolly in their sights in that 332, the blue Cayman in front of this white and orange OTL liveried racing Cayman. We get a view of the front of it as well as we come down the main start-finish straight.
Yeah, long start-finish straight, a lot longer than you sort of expect, especially in the GT4. Any kind of slipstream will help, but we saw just earlier the 332 of Jolly hopping the curb of Cheetah. The thing you can do in the GT4s, but it is not advised, and this battle still is not set off. Olefi just about keeping the place from Shinov, looking to the inside, but there was just not enough speed overlap there. It makes the racing even better when you're in such matched machinery. No one has an advantage of car. It is literally the drivers and the setup that they're running.
Well, look at Knight and Stancio. They're at the back of this train. They're kind of in the ideal spot to be able to make or break up positions here. And the two of them have just gone almost nose to tail through that whole final sector. We saw Lefe Shinov just kind of backing the pack up, but beautiful bits of racing coming out from these drivers.
Yeah, as we're still sort of nose to tail through the first lap for the first corner. Bit of flash in there. Well, second corner, I tell a lie. I keep forgetting that the kink is the first corner. We'll see what this battle can do. Sort of spaced itself out briefly, but as it says, it seems to be around about through sector 2 and 3 that people sort of all bunch up. First sector, there is kind of only one line most times, and that is what people follow. But then there's quite a few alternate lines that people take, and the S's is where you can really gain. If a driver is just that little bit less confident than you catch really quickly up to them, and then the top of the hill is often an overtaking spot. Or if the person runs wide at the bottom of the S's, you can often slingshot them coming up here.
Yeah, I mean, you are so right. The S is a bravery zone as well. A little tap of the brakes before throwing it in for the left-hander, and then you are just balancing the weight of the car throughout that entire portion of the corner. And at the top of the hill, you've almost got two entries and exits coming in. You either go for the inside apex, or you go wide and sort of sweep back through, carry a bit momentum on the exit. So there's a couple of opportunities coming through, and looking through the field, we haven't been looking at the Cup cars too much. We see Killian Ryan Meenan going very wide, playing in the sandpit for a bit, but it's Mike Noble on at the back end of James Parker in that Coach Dave Academy 888, the FFS Racing 123 with the bright purple wheels, keeping the pressure on Parker and not letting him just run away from the field. Killian Ryan Meenan was doing a good job at sticking to these two drivers as well, come the last part of the circuit lap that we saw couple of seconds ago. But Mike Noble on the splitter cam now. Ryan giving us all those views. Ryan Gill doing a great job to capture the action. He does a lot of work here at RCI, from commentary to broadcasting to adminning the racing side of things on the Discord. So big shout out to our broadcaster, and of course my co-commentator for tonight, Ryan Mawson. So good to share the box with you. It's an absolute pleasure.
Yes, and thank you. Same back. Oh, we jumped to some action. That is the 19 of Alexander Shinov off in the gravel. So what happened here? A quick race replay brought up by Ryan Gill. So this is one of the GT4s, one of the first to be lapped. And we see people sort of bunch up. Was it just a brief touch of the curb, I wonder? Yeah, just a bit too far out. We got two wheels on the dirt, and that upset the grip balance of the car. And as we said earlier, these cars are not afraid to chew you up and spit you out, and that's what happened. Upset the balance of the Porsche, and off it went. So a bit of a moment there for the 19 of Shinov, but we'll see if he can catch back up, because even though now he's dropped back a little bit, that train is fighting so hard that I would be, I think that he will be able to catch back up and will regain the battle.
I mean, that hit he had with the wall was anything but soft, so I would be surprised myself to see that he hasn't picked up any damage. And with such a high downforce dependent circuit like this, that might also just upset his rhythm and flow. So it will be a bit of a balancing point. The train in front slowing him down, but if he's done any significant damage, those GT3 cars are a lot more susceptible to aero damage, and that can upset the balance incredibly, or an incredible amount, should I say. So it'll be interesting to see just how he adapts to it, but it allows Knight and Stanshell through. They were hanging on the back waiting to eat up whoever made the first mistake, and we saw it happen here at the exit of Clubhouse, just a little bit too wide, kicking up on the exit curb. A little bit of grass as well was the reason that sent him into that wall. Mike Noble, hungry as ever in that 1-2-3, hunts down the likes of James Parker, and the two of them starting to put a little bit of space between themselves and the likes of Killian, Ryan Meenan in that 2-3-1 behind him.
Yeah, it is much easier if you've sort of stayed in slipstream range. There's quite a lot of straight at Kyalami where you don't really think about it until you drop out of sort of that 1 second gap. We'll often see drivers sort of yo-yo each other if they're within a second, but once you drop out of that slipstream range, you do start to see that cars will start pulling away, especially, like I said earlier, in matched machinery. If you've got the slipstream, you are still slightly gaining on the person in front of you. As soon as you've got it, it's not like the other GT3 leagues that we do where certain cars are better in a straight line. No one has that advantage. So yeah, once you've dropped out of that, it is hard to maintain that. As this battle's still hotting up, right up to the back is, see, I believe that is Knight in 970 up to the back of Stanshell.
I mean, Sancho and Knight are certainly trying to give it a good go. They've done a good job at just staying consistent. You can see Shinov in the background of that shot as well. And it looks like Leffer and Vita have not done with their battle just yet. And Leffer doing a good job at just keeping that pressure on. Vita kind of a cork in the bottle then for that train, but doing a good job at staying defensive, putting the car in the right place and not allowing anybody through, just hard on the defense. And I mean, that slows them down in terms of progress towards the rest of the field. But when you're battling it out for positions, it's not what you're thinking about the entire time. Mike Noble trying to still get that read onto the likes of Parker, but Parker just showing pure class and consistency at this point, and hasn't had an early incident. Oh, at the top of Leocorp, just look at how Mike Noble braves that braking zone for the hairpin and closes down that gap. James Parker with a good exit coming out and a good run through mineshaft and into the braking zone then for the Crocodiles. And the two of them taking very similar lines. Looked like Mike Noble found a little bit more of that inner apex that you want to see, and that's allowed him to just get another car length closer.
Yeah, you're just trying to nibble out sort of hundredths of a second right up under that rear wing again. But what but can you get a better run coming down this straight? We'll have the slight slipstream, but it appears that, if anything, James Parker got the slightly better run taking his line. So I don't think there will be anything. Looks to the inside, does Mike Noble. Nothing there. We do have our first penalty, actually. Stop and go 10 for the 898 for causing a collision.
That indeed is the case. 898 makes contact with and spins the number 24, taking out the number 86 and 56 in the resulting spin. Increased penalty for lap 1 is the reason for that stop-go penalty.
Yeah, it's a sad thing to see, especially sort of this early on in the race. But it's a vicious penalty. But we'll see if he can catch back up to the back of the GT, or the Cup field, sorry. Obviously very frustrated, a flash of the lights. A sign that a driver is a little bit disgruntled, I should say.
I mean, Alexander Guglia is not someone that I often ever see getting a penalty coming out. It's a very clean driver, and the nearly on pace 898 definitely on the flashes in a show of a bit of distaste and disgust in what has been handed out their way. But our full stewarding team, of course, responsible for looking into incidents, goes through them thoroughly, and they would not have avoided a penalty unnecessarily. As we see, I mean, we've got 56 minutes remaining of the race, and they've cleaned up and looked at that incident for a long time before deciding to hand that out. The stop-go 10 will then be handed out and needing to be served, as our GT4 car in the background there gives way to the GT3s coming down to the line. And it looks like they're going to be through the traffic as they go side by side into the braking zone. Vita, Shinov and Leffer all in pouncing distance of one another as they go through the very tricky first sector.
Yeah, Shinov looking like they have sort of regained their pace a little bit and continuing on. As you said earlier, that car will be carrying a little bit of damage with the 19, but a lot like as ACC simulates very well, a lot of times it can be where the damage is, because we saw him hit the front and the left side. If it is mostly side damage, that won't really affect your downforce, but it will start to affect your speed because it's upsetting the sort of the aero of the car. So yeah, it's interesting to see as one of the GT4s, the lap traffic, nowhere to go, and a little bit of a touch there.
Oh, that is such a difficult place to put yourself in. Look more into the mix as well as they come through that traffic. And I mean, all three of these drivers have dropped that position out. We saw Stancio and Knight, the two drivers leading up the rear end of the GT3 cars a couple of laps ago. They've gotten through and past these three who were continuously battling it out, and now they are making their way through the field of GT4s. Not an easy place to do so, especially when you've got the pressure on. Vita still ahead of Shinov and Leffer just behind him. This number 19 of Alexander Shinov must be so desperate to get the move done on that 221 of Vita. They have been in this position since the start of the race in terms of where their cars sit, not necessarily in terms of where their car position is on the timing sheet. I must applaud the likes of Stancio and Knight for just staying patient and managing to get past all three of those cars off camera whilst we're looking at some other action out on the circuit.
Yeah, and this is really where it starts. This is another aspect of the race that multi-class brings us, is as much as you're racing the person in front, you're trying to read them, gauge where you think you've got a bit of an advantage over them or what you're going to do. Then you've also got to read the traffic. And we've seen it a lot of times in RCI, where in multi-class racing, the person who reads the traffic the best will come out the victor. And you could argue it both sides from each driver. Sometimes it's easier as the driver in front, you can see what's going on and you can read that. Sometimes if you're the driver behind, you know what's going to happen, and say at the last moment that gap is closed by a GT4 or a Cup or any sort of car, and you go around, then that is position gained. And yeah, overtaking around Kyalami is no easy feat, but then the driver behind you has to do all that work all over again.
So much work, and just look at Mike Noble from the splitter cam, just putting that pressure on to James Parker. Has just been on the back diffuser from the very start of this race. We saw the two of them shooting it out in qualifying, and the race has not been anything but disappointing. Killian Ryan Meenan falling a little bit behind on that gap. He's fallen down, and a drive-through penalty coming through for Andrew Pike on the timing sheet as we look at the run coming down. Shinov and Leffer still trying to get past Vita, but it will be Leffer and Shinov to be side by side one another coming down into the braking zone for turn 2, and 3 alternate lines being used up there. You see Shinov just trying to, a little bit of contact coming between them, a little bit of upset on the inside curve, and that is going to be a change in position for sure.
Yeah, the 19 of Shinov wanting to get over, because that curb, what we can't really see from our camera angles, but you definitely notice it on racing, that curb of the second part of the kink, that is monstrous. It is actually a really, really, really tall curb, and if you fly over that with your GT3 car, you will be losing control of that car. So the 19 wanting to get back over and get off that curb, but obviously still cars there. Luckily, no crash, no anything. Drivers kept it under control, and that battle will, I don't think that's going to calm down for many, many laps to come. It just means now that the 19 of Shinov has to do the work again.
Well, you're not wrong. You're not wrong. They're just going to have to keep that battle up for the next 51 minutes. Mike Noble still continues up at the front here with James Parker. The two of them keep increasing their gap out to 3rd and 4th position. Looks like Ertan on the timing sheet getting a little bit closer to Mikael Sandstrom in that 899, if you are keeping an eye on those splits. But it is the closest between the two of them, Mike Noble and James Parker. Two talented drivers, always a pleasure to watch on a broadcast, and they bring a classy level of driving when they are on the track together. And now they make their way through a little bit more traffic of the GT4s. Does Mike Noble try and use this to his advantage? He just follows in the slip of that 888 of the Coach Dave Academy, and the two of them now in a much better position to use that slipstream we saw in effect slightly as Mike Noble comes down through the kink and down towards Crowthorne once again. He's a little bit later on the brakes, isn't he, Mike Noble? Does manage to make up some time into that braking zone, but the consistency of Parker is just in a class of its own at this point.
Yeah, we're seeing Mike Noble really show us what he can do on the brakes, right up to the back of the 899 most times, or the 888, sorry, and both drivers there having a bit of an oversteering moment, coming over that crest. It's very much off camber, very much wanting to chuck the cup cars all over, but both of them showing how they can be within like a tenth of one another and basically completely sideways.
Oh, I mean, it's beautiful to see Stefan van Aken catching up to the back of the likes of Jolly now. They've got some cup car pressure of the 899 behind them, and that will be Mikael Sandstrom trying to get through. But the two of them in a battle of their own for position and trying to get their own move done.
Yeah, and that's half of the problem when you're a lapped car. Obviously, you don't want to give up your battle, but you've also got to be mindful of the faster traffic coming up, and as we always say, hold your line, and it is the job of the faster car to get round. But sometimes it is so difficult as the faster car, as we see this battle continuing, just getting around lap traffic.
Oh, just so much going on at the same time as these guys try and find some space against one another. But a beautiful show coming out from the cup cars, a good show from the GT4s as well, making room for their own battles, but also just staying to the line, staying predictable and allowing the other drivers to get past. They're under no circumstances need to just jump out of the way of the other classes. It's up to the faster cars to make their way past safely. And I feel like after a little chat from our stewards last week, the drivers just showing their class up in the pro division for the stream. It's been phenomenal to watch so far, and with 48 minutes still to go on the clock, I think we're still in for some treats as we continue to watch that battle between Parker and Noble come down. A 15-second time penalty popping up on our timing sheet there for Knight. Do you have any insights on that at all, Ryan?
Currently not. I'm just trying to look through our sort of stewards, but they give the list on our desk. But so far, I haven't had anything so far, so I'll keep an eye on that anyway.
I think the piece of paper has come this way. The 970 takes out car 79 in turn 15, and no position given back. So different classes coming into contact then. The 79 and the 970. And I think that is where the time penalty has come in. 15 seconds being added on. That's quite a lot of time if you look at the timing differentials there. That will put Knight all the way to the back of his GT3 class.
Yeah, especially when everyone is this close. No one's really spread out. I mean, sometimes you see these penalties, and especially in endurance racing, when everybody has spread out. But these Porsche Masters, just everyone is so close, so consistent. And we see Stancho still trying to get the move done on Seredi. A little bit wide was the number 4, but once again, nothing to be gained. Both drivers still got a brilliant run. They come through and into the left-hander of Clubhouse. Still very, very close. And once again, I have a feeling this will be another battle that we'll have to keep our eyes on. Knight just about there in the background, but dropping off slowly now.
Emil Stanchu is such a talented driver from Racing Line Motorsport. We see a lot of their cars featured in our races, whether it's endurance or sprints or here in the Porsche Masters Cup. And Emil Stancio just showing us that there's pure class involved when it comes to making their way through the field. The 199 all over the back end of that number 4. So ready onto the inside line. Emil a bit later on the brakes. He's going to have a very alternate line coming through, trying to cut back. Both of them running quite deep through there. So no one really winning, but Seredi in terms of track position stays ahead. No one being forced to go side by side out through the dangers of Cheetah. And it will be a good run coming out from Stancho. He had a good braking zone down into Ingwe and has allowed him to just stay less than a car length behind, and will be making use of that slipstream down through the start-finish straight, out through the kink and down to the braking zone. Looks to the inside at Crowthorne. Is he later on the brakes here? That's a very brave move coming down. Gets the car turned around, and a brilliant move coming out from the 191. So Reddy will feel robbed out of that one, and that was a brilliant bit of driving coming out from the Racing Line Motorsport number 191.
Yeah, you can see the 191 in the mirrors sort of darting around, coming past Cheetah into the last corner. You're sort of just trying to throw the driver on front off their line, off their rhythm that you want. And yeah, using the slipstream down the straight at the last possible second. Almost looks like they're going to the outside to make them think that they're trying to go around the outside, and then at the last second swap to the inside, late on the brakes and up the insides. And now the 191 has to use that advantage that he's got and run away, which is very easy said, harder done. And we swap back to, briefly, GT4 Cup. This is the 332, I beg your pardon, of Jolly, being chased down by the 233 of Kingston Lee. Both of these drivers sort of pacing themselves very well. GT4s, you can see in the background we start getting some of the cuts to lap there. So that'll be another thing that will well, I say aid, it could aid or hinder each of these cars' battles. Running wide out of Sunset. Got to be careful to do that. That's the other thing that we haven't really talked about yet, is there is a lot of places on this track where you can gain track limits.
Apologies for leaving you hanging there, Ryan. I got so excited to see some of the Cayman action. I stood up too fast in the comms box and ripped my entire headset out. So, good to see some of the Caymans featuring up here. Kingston Lee trying to get past the likes of Jolly, and the two of them are getting closer and closer, of course, to Finnegan. So all three of these cars in shooting distance of changing up their positions here in class. And they've got plenty of traffic to also deal with in terms of they've just got Cup cars and GT3s raining down on them from all angles. Always difficult to be the car or the class that has the slowest power differential. And right now Matthew Kingston Lee in the KL Racing 233, doing a good job to just keep the likes of Jolly and Van Aken in sight, as we see Haleman coming round in that number 24. He's making his way through traffic, and unfortunately for Haleman, he had to put it into the pit box early on. That means that he's on positions. He's actually running along with the GT4s. We saw him into the wall. I believe there was a second incident with him after a very good qualifying from that Pink Elephant GT3. So he'll be a bit upset about his position at the moment, but heads down and just trying to make up positions. It's always good to see drivers not retiring, but sticking it out for the duration of the race. Mike Noble is past James Parker, and that is a big change up indeed. Parker doing a good job to keep Noble behind, but it looks like coming down through the exit of the Crocodiles, the 123 has got the jump on the 888, as James Parker, very big jump over Cheetah. A little bit of mowing of the lawn on the exit apex, but manages to keep the car pointed in the right direction and will continue that pursuit to get that position back. Here we get a race replay. Mike Noble, drifty boy round the outside. It looked like it might have even been done just before when they came through the S's, but a brilliant bit of driving coming out from Mike Noble to get that position, and you can be sure that James Parker is not going to let that up easily.
No, that will now be Mike's turn to try the defensive driving sideways up there through once again that sort of off camber crest, and we see just pulling out just a smidge, about a half a tenth now. But the Cup cars are so hard to drive consistently. I mean, both of these drivers, amazing to pull this much of a gap to the rest of their sort of respective fields. But we see both of these on the edge, using all the curb they dare and correcting the car left and right.
Oh, I mean, brilliant bits of driving coming out. I wonder if tires are going to start to be a factor, because the likes of Noble and Parker have been pushing quite a lot. They'll have the fuel, I'm sure, to do this in a single stint, but I think the tires might be an interesting thing to see where they go. You talked about the degradation a little bit earlier on, but I'm keen to see just where that battle finds itself. Jolly and Van Aken, they are going to go side by side. The 420 of Van Aken on the exit of Barbecue there on the outside line, comes back across in front of Ty Jolly, and they've got Kingston Lee in that 223. The beautiful purple and dark purple livery of that Cayman looks stunning in the light here at 12:43. Even though we don't have full sunshine coming out, we got some GT3 cars coming through the pack as well. So the three of these drivers just trying to do their best to hold their line. The double one weaving through the field, and the 332 maybe a little bit shaken up there. Van Aken, a couple of car lengths ahead, and now the pressure from Kingston Lee in that 233 coming up to the top of the hairpin is starting to take effect. Needs to stay defensive, and this is exactly what Van Aken needs to just get himself away from that chaos behind him.
Yeah, we saw the 332 fighting the wheel through some of those corners, and that's the other part as well. As much as, for tire degradation, the GT3s, we sort of expect them, the regular amounts of tire degradation. But what'll be interesting is obviously the Cups may burn it a little bit more because of all the corrections and the sliding that you're having. But the GT4s are historically not bad on tires. When you look at them, for the tire wear indicators, you think, that you haven't really burnt that much. But when all of your grip is pretty much focused on mechanical grip, the GT4 is not really having much aero. They have a bit of a wing and maybe a tiny bit of front aero and some underfloor aero, but they don't have much, and that will be really...
no! I mean, we hopefully get a replay of that, and it will be Ty Jolly to escape from Van Aken and Kingston Lee, but it was down into that braking zone, getting caught up a little bit with one of the GT3 cars, as we're going to have a little look-see at this. We see Van Aken up at the top. Maybe one of the GT3s coming on the inside line. We've got a replay to just check it out. And coming down into the, it was Kingston Lee who had a big send, actually caused that collision, smashed into the the stewards. Can you see how upset they are, Ryan? They are looking at us. Is that Is that a finger wag and a shaking of heads going down from that box?
Yes, I can see some pencils being brought out, but I mean, as I mentioned that sort of in qualifying, I think part of that as well was down with I mentioned that on the GT4s, the rear end is quite weird, and we saw that Aiken sort of at the last moment panicked, had tried to move out the way, but if you have a quick direction change which unloads one side of the car, it locks up the rear differential, or it sort of unlocks one wheel, as per se. And it just, becomes an absolute Larry fest. I drove one of the GT4 Caymans here in the wet at Kyalami for a prior league that I did. And that was the thing that I took home most, is that very, very careful on the brakes and minimal direction changes while you're still holding the brakes, because there's something funky about the rear end of that car.
I mean, it's been a while since I tuned into the Olympics, but as a judge, Kingston Lee is getting awarded a couple of points for that dive, and probably not points in the right direction from our stewards.
Yeah, there's not the sort of prize points that you want at the end of the day. At least you want the minimal ones of them.
Limited amounts indeed, and James Parker struggling to catch back up to Noble now as they go 6/10 behind in terms of the timing sheet. Andrew Pike in the Auto will get a race replay here. Is he just going to make a pass coming through here? We'll have to wait and see. Looks like the pressure's on, goes to the inside line under braking, and we'll get that move done. Is there a cutback attempt? No, there isn't. So Andrew Pike getting that overtake done, and a very nice overtake coming down indeed.
Yes, and that's, we can see now Pike slightly gapping. And these were some of the cars that were involved in that slight smash. The 666 of Burgess we saw spinning around at turn 2. Those picked themselves back up and then continuing on. And under a pressure from the number 4 of Seredi. Sort of the story of this race is this little train continuing on. Sort of space themselves out slightly, but still some great battles. Looking to the outside is Seredi. That is a long old way around the outside through the marbles. Might just about get it done, and he does, even before Cheetah.
I mean, I would like to see a race replay of that done. It felt like he did go a very interesting way around to get through. Corentin Burgess will feel that that car came out of nowhere. Here we get the race replay coming down. And does he go quite wide? He does. All 4 wheels off the track around the outside. I'd be surprised if he didn't get a track warning for going that way around. And the sim will regulate those kind of things, but an interesting maneuver being pulled as the 666 just sees the number 4 come up in the mirrors and not quite sure of where he could go, but just came out in front of him before they went through Cheetah. But Antonio Seredi gets the move done, and the 666 of Burgess will be left to follow and chase down, try and make that position back up at a later stage. Only 34 minutes to go in this race. This is Racing Club International's Porsche Masters Cup. We are here at Kyalami for round 3. My name, George Smith, joined in the box with Ryan Mawson, and of course our camera work being done by Ryan Rai Gill, the ever-talented commentator / broadcaster, this time showing us the camera work, and it is a handful in itself, because these drivers in the 3 classes, GT4s, Cup cars and GT3s, have been pushing it to the limits. And we haven't had much time, have we, Ryan, to look at this man, Jordan Forshaw, who took pole in the qualifying session and now sits 6 seconds ahead of Banfield and leads out in the GT3 Pro class.
Yeah, not really being on the camera as much, which sometimes you would like to be a little bit more, but it can also sometimes be a blessing. It means you haven't been involved in any sort of crashes, battles, or anything crazy. They've just had an amazing drive, really, pulled out, being very consistent, very clean, and yeah, even with the lap traffic, normally that starts to slow some drivers down. If you have a bit of a problem getting by a GT4, you can see the time drop, but no, not for Jordan Forshaw. Just making it look easy in his GT3 car.
Really is, and putting a bit of a gap out to Banfield at the same time. Same as this man, Mike Noble, in the FFS Racing 123, was caught up behind James Parker for a long time. We see that trail of dust in the background, so I think Parker goes a little bit wide out of Cheetah once again. This is going to cost him time catching up. 1.3 seconds behind the likes of Noble at this point, and Noble showing why he is capable of coming out in the Cup car class. And this time round as well, we don't have Joe McCauley in the mix between the three of them.
No, Joe McCauley, sort of the Cup leader as it sits at the moment, not racing this time, which will mean that they will really shuffle up the points situation, will mean that a couple of the drivers have the opportunity to catch up, and it'll mean that the rest of this season, McCauley's really got to be on it if he wants to retain his lead.
Oh, I mean, this is what we like to see in the championship. A little bit of a change up, a little bit of controversy coming down. Andy Boardman leads out in what is my favorite car number in sim racing, because it is arrogant to choose number 1. Of course, number 69 is better, but Andy Boardman sitting in the number 1 spot for the GT4s, as he sits 6.5 seconds ahead of Charisma in second, and Baranowski in third place, 13.8 seconds behind Charisma. So also a good run coming out for Andy Boardman, and a great team name there as well, Greased Weasel Racing.
Yeah, and I mean, going like a greased weasel at the minute. Looking at the lap times, the best versus the last, you can see, though, that the GT4s are starting to suffer a little bit for all of these drivers. As I said, the GT4s really rely on the tyre grip. It's their only sort of form of grip, is everything mechanical. If it starts to lose it even a little bit, you really do notice the lap times drop off. The only sort of blessing is that the GT4 cars can take a little bit more beating than the GT3s and still be lap time. So if you have a bit of rubbiness racing door to door, it won't be as detrimental as if you damage a GT3 car. But can this be the move for Pike? Looks to the inside into turn 2, late on the brakes, and it looks like they will just about get the position. Will that cutback be made?
That was some great driving coming out from Pike. We've seen it send it up the inside of Crowthorne behind. Look at the Cup car splitting him out. It looks like the inside line. Mike Noble is robbed and ripped off entirely there by the likes of James Parker. That was a great bit of driving as they split the field of the GT4s. And just look at that, James Parker using that to his advantage, gets ahead, and we'll get a race replay of that for sure. Just watch this. Just watch and appreciate what happens here.
And we said it exactly, didn't we? Whoever reads the traffic sometime can be the victor.
Oh, that is great. James Parker sees that he needs to do this, and Mike Noble forced to the outside, had a GT4 next to him, had nothing that he could really do. It had picked his line already, and James Parker just shows us why he is as good as he is. Mike Noble will be looking back at that and thinking, I've got the pace to catch him. I can do so now as well. And they're coming up to more lap traffic, all down to decisions onto who is going to come out of this on top. It's not just talent on the track. It's also the mindfulness to be aware of the traffic around you.
Yeah, Parker had seen that Noble had already committed to the outside of that GT4 very early. But obviously seeing when the GT4 started running wide, there was just about a couple car's width on the inside. Shoved it up there, and that is it, position gained. And I mean, we said it before, as we have a Cup car, it's Killian Ryan Meenan's car sliding in the background. But we have said it before, haven't it, that a lot of times if you can read the traffic better, that is sometimes what you need. And now, yeah, battle resumed again, Noble versus Parker.
I mean, if you're not tuned in and watching this, what are you doing with yourselves? I know that all the support out in the chat and from our viewers will be appreciating the brilliant bits of driving that we've had here. So if you haven't already, share it with the family, share it with your friends, let them see just what it's like to have this action on the track. It looks like Kingston Lee getting a little bit wayward out the Exeter Barbecue in the background. We saw that purple Cayman darting around as the hunt continues for Andrew Pike. He's going to now find Van Aken, the number 420 came in front of him, putting the pressure on, trying to just get in the mirrors. We saw this working out earlier on in the GT3s, and now Andrew Pike doing exactly that, keeping the pressure on and trying to find a way past Van Aken. Doesn't want to get caught up here too long, as it would allow the likes of Kingston Lee to catch back up. And with his mistake out of barbecue, there's a couple of car lengths of sort of free space now that Andrew Pike has to work with. Doesn't have to worry about his mirrors too much, can focus on getting past Van Aken. He's shown us with pace that he can get through the field. Maybe we'll just see him extending out and using his braking zone into Crowthorne to get the moves done. That seems to be his spot to line those up.
Yeah, and we can also see if he can get past Van Aken quickly. That not far up ahead up the road is the 332 of Tiwa Jolly. So that could be a three-way battle hotting up. We'll have to keep an eye on that gap. So far, it kind of looks like the gap with both of these drivers are reeling in Jolly slowly. I think the gap was just over a second the last time around, at 1.8, 1.7 seconds. This lap it stabilizes, but we'll see what happens. Looking out of the rear diffuser cam of the 420, looking back at that bright orange car of Pike.
Pike just not in the position that he wanted to be coming down into that braking zone for Crowthorne, but will stay on the back diffuser, keep the pressure on and find an alternate way around barbecue. He exits very, very nicely, and now the run down to Sunset could be the place that we see them go 2 cars wide. I think they are going. He's going to try around the outside here. Very brave position to be in, not quite in the position to do it though. Apex is back, cuts back into the inside line, and they've got a cup car in the background starting to add some chaos into this on-track battle. The two of them go 2 cars wide. The outside of Clubhouse puts Van Aken on the inside for the S's, but oh, the bravery from Andrew Pike comes out, and he gets another move done in a very brave place to do so. Just as they get into the S's, putting himself in the right place, Van Aken having to doubt himself, slow the car down even further, but it's not done just yet. Does Van Aken try around the outside at the top of the hill at Leeuwkop? Not quite going to be able to fight back. Andrew Pike from OTL Racing on another level tonight in these Caymans.
Yeah, a long old way around Sunset and then Clubhouse, but Pike knew that as soon as you come into the S's, he'll be on the outside for the first sector, but a lot of times the second S is actually where you want to be, on the inside. That will give you the best run up to the hairpin, and they just about hold the position off. Oh,
is Mike Noble going to try on the inside here? Both of them breaking themselves a little bit later there, but both get the car slowed down and turned around. Oh, it's the bravery between these two drivers swapping out the positions. I just love the fact that Parker got that move done in the traffic, and Noble has managed to reel him back in. 25 minutes left to go on the clock, Ryan. We are in for a treat for the next 25 for sure. This is the racing that we want to see, and I couldn't be more happy to be back at Kyalami, my home circuit, and to have my favorite cars in all forms out on the circuit at the same time. It's been a treat to watch so far.
Yeah, the wick beat definitely being turned up for the last sort of 20 minutes. Now a lot of these cars will really be starting to lighten the fuel load, so we see the pace increase, and especially with the straight line speeds of some of these. Mike Noble trying it on Parker, but every single time it's just the door is shut. You see coming right up underneath the wing again, but both drivers get a good run going down into mineshaft. A flash of the lights trying to put Parker off, but nothing like that will really phase either of these drivers.
No, definitely wouldn't phase them, and the two of them very much used to driving against each other in track and in this class of car. Both of them loving the Cup Car Series that get run not just here at Racing Club International, but at other communities as well. As Mike Noble in the braking zone has always shown since the start of this race that he has a good read for where he can carry speed through them, but the exit from Parker down the start-finish straights has almost been a saving grace since the start of this race. Manages to put the time and distance between the two of them, so it's almost like they alternate better sectors throughout the race, and it all comes down to where they are on track as to who comes out on top.
Yeah, and we see that, you know, this is sort of the difference between two drivers, their strengths and weaknesses, as we've seen. Mike Noble, amazing on the brakes, right up to the back of Parker. But Parker, a couple of corners are slightly faster through, and the exits that Parker can gain coming out onto the straights, obviously great throttle control in that car with no TC, just keeping him ahead of Mike Noble at the minute. But we swap back to our GT3 class, which also still hasn't done. This is the 19 of... Is it Shinov? I cannot pronounce that properly.
That is right.
There we go. Still on the back of the 221 of Vita. These guys have been battling for a while. Cup car being let through.
And it's been Vita that sort of had a bit of a struggling battle here for a long part of the starting phase of this race. The likes of that 221 of Vita was ahead of a big train of cars and has slowly bled out positions, but done a good job at keeping a lot of the pack behind. And I wonder once again if that comes down to maybe overworking the tires in the early phase of the race, not having a lot of grip left towards the end of it. But regardless of where it is, Shinov still not quite on the back end of Vita to get that move done. Olaf Leffer in the number 308 or over the back of Seredi. We saw Seredi with a very interesting pass to get past the likes of Burgess coming into Crocodile earlier on. Got used the entire width of the track and more to get the advantage coming through, and Leffe now in a good position to start to pounce on that number 4 in front, trying to get more points on the board, always the name of the game. And out through the braking zone of the top of the hill at Leeuwkop, they make their run down the long hill of Mineshaft. The descent here is absolutely crazy. Having been able to do a little bit of walking around the circuit before, I did not appreciate the change in elevation until I had to do it on my own 2 feet, and it's incredible to see as Olaf Leffer keeps that pressure on the back end here of Seredi down into the braking zone for the left hand of the final corner and the run down to the line. This is the slipstream you want, isn't it, Ryan?
Yeah, as much as you can, sort of tuck your car entirely behind, just trying to get any amount of slipstream. Leffe looking to the right, possibly looking to go on the outside. Seredi will defend it, but we've seen it is a long old way around turn 1, well, turn 2 even, but can you get the cutback? Not yet. Still a better run by that number 4 of Seredi. Hard up onto the brakes. And behind him, we see the 19 of Shinov trying to get finally around the 221. Looks to the inside again, but there was nothing there. Bounces over the curb. Just about keeps the position, does Vita in the 221.
Well, I mean, all over the place is Alexander Shinov trying to get the read coming out, and Vita going to be scrubbing a lot of time, having to put himself into the defensive positions, but making sure that wherever, ever Alexander Shinov goes, it has to be round the outside, and that's going to be costing positions. A little bit unsettled there coming into the S's, a little bit of inner curb being used, and Vita going to be using that to get a better run up to the top of the hill.
Yeah, and as we can see as well, the 19 was the car that had the damage earlier. So the left-hand side and the front of the car is carrying damage, which will definitely not be helping his battle. But Shinov still managing to drive that car amazingly all over the back of Vita, which, as he says, could be a tyre thing. I mean, we've been on these tyres now, what, over 50 minutes. So we're coming up to an hour on these tyres. So they will definitely not be factory fresh anymore.
Not the way they came out of factory at all. I see that the 233 of Kingston Lee has been given a 15-second time penalty. I think that was for the incident where the late break came in, tried to avoid the 332 and took out the 666 in a different class. So that will be the penalty that we thought would be coming through for the monumentous dive coming into Crowthorne.
Yeah, so once, as we said, look over to our stewards and they were all penciling away. We kind of expected it, didn't we? So once again, that will drop them down quite a while in their sort of GT4 category. A little bit more spaced out than the GT3s, but still, yeah, nothing that you want. Swapping back to the 308 of Olefe, all over the back of the number 4. Looks a little bit closer into the S's. can they do anything with it? You get a better run. If you can get a better run coming out, you might just get him coming into the hairpin. It does look slightly like, well, if they had a better run diving to the inside and then to the out, nothing to be gained there.
Just trying to make their way through the traffic as well. We saw how planning that traffic also comes into effect. James Parker and Mike Noble going to tell that story. Mike Noble less than a 7/700th of a second behind Parker on the timing sheet as Olaf Leffe is chasing down onto Seredi still. It's just a beautiful battle between these two, trying to find their way through, and if no one makes a mistake, it's very difficult to make that overtake. You've got the braking zone after the start-finish straight where they find themselves now, where you can be a little bit braver on the brakes, but it can also all go wrong, as we see them coming past Kingston Lee in just a second as they come down to the braking zone. There it is, Kingston Lee making a mistake here earlier on, trying to get a braking move done and picking himself up that 15-second time penalty, but staying well out of the way. Oh, through the Uxke sweep they go. And that is the traffic once again. That's going to be the 420 that just gives some breathing space out to Leffe. Already with the inside line, gets the read, and just look how much space that is created for him before he comes into sunset.
Yeah, another traffic read at the exact same place, just picking which side you want to go versus the GT4. It opened up a little bit of time, but not for long. Caught right back up through the left-hander of Clubhouse. And once again, we go back to the sort of the same story. Is there anything to be had out of the S's? Both drivers this time looked like they had a good run, so I expect that gap to stay. As we swap back to Alexander Shirkov. Still, once again, battling the 221 of Vita. Vita making him every single time go around the outside. And if I'm not mistaken as well, if we look just up ahead, that is the 666 of Burgess just about coming into view of this battle. So it might actually be that Vita and Chernov found someone else to battle soon.
You are not wrong. You are not wrong. That is the 666 of Burgess that they catch themselves up to. So a good position actually for Shinov to find himself in if Burgess is struggling a little bit. That is a brave bit of driving to stick it onto the inside line. You've got that infamous sausage curb on your right side, and then you've got a GT4 on the outside exit. You've got a very small place to thread the needle, and nose to tail they go down towards the kink, making their way through or past Van Aken in that 420 GT4, and very wide goes Shinov. Is he going to try around the outside to break here? Yes, he is going to put himself onto an interesting line. Oh, the move is done and dusted. Brilliant bit of driving coming in from Alexander Shinov in the number 19. His car team name, the Desperate Measures, and that was certainly a brave desperate measure indeed. Look at this, splits himself out to the outside line here, comes back in across the apex, and brilliant read there. Knew that he could carry more speed coming into the Uxke sweep by doing that. And Alexander Shinov, what a monumental drive that was. We've watched him try and get past for the better part of the whole duration of this race, and with 15 minutes to go, manages to get that read done.
Yeah, forces the 221 of Vita narrow, and when you do that, you sort of compromise that driver's line. You make them defend as hard as you can. If you then swap back to the outside to the optimum line at the last possible second, you just get by, and that is exactly what the 19 of Chernov did. And looking up the timing screen, we have a 5-second penalty for the 308 of Olefi, which will really put sort of a downer on his spirits with this amazing battle. And looking through the piece of paper that's been chucked on my desk, that is 308 and the 19, a 5-second for car 308. I believe they contacted car 19 and forced them onto the curb. Aggressive overtake with contact.
I mean, that is something that the stewards would be looking into and keeping an eye out on. So good to see that some regulation being applied in, and a 5-second time penalty coming out. And that could just be enough to put Burgess back into the mix of things here. 5.5 seconds the last Delta time update, and 13 minutes to go. So needs to make sure that keeps himself ahead of that 666 if he doesn't want that penalty to influence this racing position.
Yeah, so that will be sort of the moment for Burgess to sort of pick up the pace a little bit. Once again, dropping back a little bit, 6 seconds back, because he's also got to worry about the number 19 of Chernov, who's back on the charge, coming back through the field now that he has been released from behind the 221 of Vita.
Seredi is starting to get into the danger zone of defense at this point. Leffe is starting to try and find a way past, and into the braking zones especially. You can just see that 308 is carrying a little bit more bravery coming down, wants to try and bully Antonio Seredi into making a mistake, try and just make him outbrake himself whilst looking in the mirrors so that the 308 can find a way past, darting in the mirrors, going from the outside line, once again trying to just carry more momentum on the exit, and I think it's worked out quite well there. Puts himself right on the back end of that diffuser, almost in the ability to bump draft one another. They are going to pull out, and Olaf Leffe on the outside here will have a great run coming through the Yuxke sweep here if he can get the car turned in on time, and it looks like once again is going to get a good read. They are going to go side by side coming into the Yuxke sweep, but Olaf Leffe with the confidence inside his pocket is going to get caught out by that GT4 on the exit of Barbecue, but it's not enough. Look at this again here, Ryan Mawson.
Yeah, once again, we've sort of seen it. This move paid off a couple of times. Round the outside is a long old way, but if you can keep your car around the outside, you have the inside for now. And then it's incredibly hard then, because most times people can come back at that, just about manages to get it in front, and then has to dodge the GT4 lapped traffic. Manages to do it, although successfully. Position gain for Olaf Leffe. So even though that won't affect Seredi, because of that 5-second penalty, Seredi will stay ahead. What Olaf is now trying to do is run away. He doesn't want to fall behind the 666 of Burgess, who, speaking of, is under attack from 3 ways.
Oh, I mean, this is what you want to see with 11 minutes to go on the clock. The 221 alongside the number 19. Vita is trying to just hold on to this position a little bit longer. Shinov on the inside. Oh, the Taparoo comes down. And I feel like the pressure mounting up. And it is going to be Vita to drive away from this. Quentin Burgess going to return to the pits after that immediately. As coming down, big dive. Big send coming down. Oh, I mean, stewards are going to have their hands full. I'm not an expert on the stewarding side. I stay away. I like to talk on the microphone, use my voice to make sounds. But I think the stewards are going to have an interesting time trying to wrap that up. Down in the GT Cup class, or the Cup cars, Mike Noble, 0.420 off of the likes of Parker, as he tries to get past once again at some point here. But Parker, we talked about a masterclass of driving across the field in the different classes, and Parker, having got that position back using the traffic to his advantage, has not allowed Noble another breath of being at the front of their class.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think that either of these people have been, apart from a second, this entire race really shows when you put these two drivers in what is arguably the hardest sort of category of car to drive. No traction control, very limited downforce, and now with the fuel burning away, there's going to be, the front end is going to start being light, which gives the rear that more pendulum effect. As you can see, Parker having a tiny bit of a slide through Barbecue, compromises his exit slightly, but not enough to be done. And then, fuel burning off, tires burning off, no traction control. But these two drivers, just absolute masterclass, right next to each other.
They have had this sort of gap between them since the start of the race, and it's changed up once, but it's not going to be allowed to happen again if James Parker has anything to do about it. Up at the front of the pack as well, Emil Stanchiao is just 2/10 behind the likes of Banfield in the GT3 Pro class. Oh, braking mistake coming out from James Parker. Mike Noble on the inside. They're going to go side by side, almost coming down to the mine shaft, but not quite. The overlap isn't just there. Mike Noble wants to go on the inside, forcing James Parker onto the inside line as he goes for the alternate wider line through, trying to carry some more speed as they come up through the Crocodiles and the run towards Cheetah. They've got another GT4 between them, once again going to be in the way of where they're going to be able to get through. James Parker sees the GT4 going for the apex, slows himself down just a little bit to avoid that, but now Mike Noble in the slip, in the toe, down at the start finish straight, trying to get into the mirrors, trying to find a way where to break. Look at James Parker forcing the inside line to be blocked off, making Mike Noble go round the outside, but just putting his car in the... Oh, this is a brilliant bit of defense coming out from Parker. We've seen that outside line work out for cars in the past, but James Parker just making sure he parks it towards the apexes and not allowing Noble a nose to even get alongside.
Yeah, and as we saw, sort of once again, a tale of two drivers, each of their strengths. It always seems that James Parker is just that tiny bit better, getting the power down with that car, sort of slightly better throttle modulation. So even though Mike Noble was alongside, fully alongside on the outside of turn 2, and we've seen plenty of cars this race go around there, it was not to be. Just James Parker got the slightest better exit, and that put the car just in front. So once again, battle briefly paused, but we can see Mike Noble right up in the braking zones at the top of the hill, trying to get the better run down mineshaft.
So Ryan Gill just whispering in our ears here as well, just about the fuel side of the GT3s. It's a long stint, 75 minutes to be out in the Porsche, a little bit of a shorter lap time here. So I wonder if drivers have been running on a conservative engine mapping from the start, maybe doing a bit of fuel saving as well, or if they are going to have to go into the pits for fuel. As we've been informed, Knight in that number 970, he's been into the pits to stop for fuel, whereas the rest of the field still hasn't decided what's happening there. With 6 minutes to go, you'd hope that you wouldn't have to go into the pit box, would you? So maybe some fuel saving going to be applied out to some of these drivers, or they have to go in. But that battle in the in the Cup car class here between Noble and Parker, once again Parker doing the exact same thing to Noble that he did on the previous lap, forcing the move to be delayed coming into that very, very tricky James Parker with a big drift throughout the entirety of barbecue there has allowed Mike Noble to get back onto that rear wheel, but it's not going to be enough. The GT4's in the way once again here as Mike Noble tries to see if he can thread the needle between himself and Park. On the inside, Mike Noble going to send it out of clubhouse. A little tap comes in between them, and now James Parker in the position to try and get something defended through the S's. They are going to say side by side. Parker on the inside line. They're running up towards the braking zone of the hairpin, and these two drivers are just trying to see what they can get done. Noble on at the inside line, Parker forced to go round the outside, but who carries the speed down the hill? It looks like Noble getting the move done with 5 minutes to go. I don't think Parker's letting off just yet, but that was a nice bit of driving between the two of them.
Now we see Parker looking to the inside. Mike Noble has run wide a little bit. That has opened the door for Parker. That AAA on the inside of Cheetah. Will they go too wide? Yes, they will. Just about. It looks like, though, the 1, 2, 3 just about ahead. But now who can carry more speed down the straight? The AAA of Parker with the outside line, the better line for the run. And there you go. He's just about got it. Now, will we see the same move again where Parker slams the door hard into it to make Mike Noble go round the outside? Or will he be too far back? I do not think that Parker is going to slam the door as hard.
He doesn't need to, because he knows Noble can't go around the outside. There's a GT4 there, so both of them are going to just follow each other through that position. But what a positional change it was. Noble felt that he could sniff a victory there a little bit, and immediately Parker answers back, keeps his cool composure, and gets the lead coming down into the final sector, but the two of them have just been having an incredible drive out in these Cup cars. The conditions have stayed favorably dry for them. They haven't had to worry too much about their traction control in the wet. That doesn't mean these cars are easy to drive in the dry at all, especially at a circuit like this at Kyalami, where there's so much weight shifting coming around, and the back end or the rear engine nature of these cars with that accelerator pedal without the traction control makes them want to loop around very, very easily. You want to avoid first gear at all costs, and just a drive that I can't fault and has been absolutely phenomenal to be able to witness between the two of them.
Yeah, so now with 3 minutes, it's now all up to Parker to defend from Mike Noble. We've got maybe a couple of laps left to go, depending on where our leader is on track. But yeah, you'd think that with 3 minutes to go, a lot of people would say it's all well and done, but now Parker running a little bit wide onto the grass, as up ahead as well. Chernov in the 19s getting a drive-through, and I believe that was a drive-through for track limits, not a penalty. So that will be another one of the ones that we saw. Well, I believe that's the first one we've had handed out by the sim for track limits.
Yeah, I think it is, and it can be so tricky here to stay within the limits. Easy to take the exit out, especially through Crocodile. That run towards Cheetah is so easy to try and get a little bit more straight line speed. Oh, Noble with a little correction of that drift going to impact his run out speed coming out of Barbecue, but once again going to be darting in at the mirrors of James Parker in that 888 Coach Dave Academy Cup car, and these two are not done and dusted. 2 minutes 19 remain on the clock. We saw Noble on the inside here early on getting a move done. Oh, Parker with a little slap back, and that isn't going to allow Noble to get through just yet, but a brilliant bit of correction coming in. I wonder if Noble just had to ease off, scared of getting caught up in that, and now they've got the likes of one of the GT3 cars bearing down on them. That's the 970, I believe, that is catching up to them that wants to get through. That's Alan Knight, who has gone into the pits to serve or go and put in some fuel into that car. Shinov going to be serving up his drive-through penalty, so Knight should be able to get through coming into this, as Noble doesn't want to cause any taps onto there, flash of the light. He's not impressed with that. He feels that that car came across his apex, and he's going to be on the flashes. That puts this entire battle on ice for what should be the last minute of racing.
Yeah, just about getting caught up with the GT3s lapping, and yeah, it's so hard sometimes, so that might pause that battle. But I mean, we saw it. We've seen that gap open up before and then close immediately in the last couple of corners. So it wouldn't surprise me really. But when we were going on about the fuel situation earlier, it looks like all of these drivers will make it to the end. We've got 54 seconds left on the clock, and depending on where our leader is, that will probably be one more lap to go.
You are right. We've just had word from our race director that our leader is on the final lap. So these drivers will all be trying to just get it to the line. I'll be interested to see in the chat box from them when they're done, when we get to have a little chat ski with them to see just how much fuel is remaining in these cars. James Parker still stays ahead of Noble as they come in for what should be their final lap as well. But I mean, this has been an incredible battle in the Cup car class. The GT4s, they've had some battles themselves, and the GT3s have also had some interesting things, but for sure in that number 11 in the GT3 Pro class, up in P1 in class and P1 overall, I mean 11.2 seconds ahead of Banfield. That's just been a masterclass drive that we haven't been able to feature too much of because there's been so much action throughout the field for the entire duration of this 75-minute race.
Yeah, so for Jordan, for sure, like I said, no one around him to contest it coming down the way, as we have in the closing seconds of this race one of the last penalties to be served, and that is a 15-second penalty for car 19. So that is another penalty for Chernov. A sad thing to see to the end of your race on in it, but for this man, Jordan, for sure, an amazing drive. Pretty much from lights to flag, led the race and yeah, just drove away from everyone in the GT3 class. Almost made it look easy.
Almost made it look easy, and a massive gap coming out to Banfield in second place, but John Fisher for Prime Racing in that number 11, taking home the P1 in the Pro class for the GT3s. Banfield comes over the line to take home second, and it will be one more lap then for the likes of Noble and Parker to see how that transpires. It looks like a P3 or P4 Ertan has crossed over the line, so Noble and Parker will be rounding out this lap. Lefe, with a 5-second time penalty, will take home third place in that 3:08. Andy Boardman in the Greased Weasel Racing number 69 should come to the line to win out the pro class for the GT4s, and it's been a great drive for them. We talked about big gaps, and 7.8 seconds to Charisma means that the number 69 has done a great job at just getting ahead and staying ahead for what should have been a tough race for everybody here. The rain at least held out and did not come through. They had the conditions that they would have wanted to come down, and Andy Boardman then crosses the line, takes home P1 in the GT4s.
Yep, and that will be it for the Cup cars. The AAA of James Parker just about held off Mike Noble. Not an easy feat. Such an amazing drive by both of these drivers. A celebratory spin synchronized by both of them. But yeah, what a drive from both of those drivers. Pretty much a second apart the entire race, side by side. Every time we looked at them, you didn't know where to look. There was a train going on in the GT3s, there's the GT4s, there's the Cups. Every time you looked at the track map, just crazy things were happening.
I'm so glad that we just get to just add commentary onto this. Our cameraman himself, Ryan Gill, will need to have a good rest after this race, because at this point there was so much action taking place on the circuit. Ryan, I really had a good night tonight. That racing was incredible. I think that the drivers really showed their class.
Oh yeah, that was some amazing racing, some amazing moves where you just don't think, and this is, showing these drivers, why they're in the pro split of RCI. You think, oh my God, you can't go around the outside of turn 2, and not just one driver did it, but multiple drivers, 2 wide through the S's, and just lots of close racing.
Close racing, and looking at that final finishing leaderboard in the GT3s, for sure takes home P1, Banfield second, Lefe wraps up at the podiums there, Stanchill just outside that podium position in P4, Vita takes home 5th, Seredi 6th, Shinov in 7th, Knight in 8th, Heilman in 9th, and Burgess finishes 10th. Looking at the Cup class, Parker, of course, taking home the victory ahead of Mike Noble, and then Ryan Meenan in 3rd place on the podium. Erten, Guglia finishing 4th and 5th, Sundstrom in 6th, 7th for Helicalio, and 8th for Whitford. In the GT4s, Boardman taking home P1, Charisma on that second row of the podium, and then Baranowski taking home P3. Just outside that in 4th, Pike, with 5th going to Jolly, 6th for Van Aken, 7th to Kingston Lee, 8th for Redford, 9th for Vondra, 10th for Gleason, 11th for Tang, and 12th for Jacobson.
And that about wraps it up for What About This Night at Kyalami. Crazy night, and yeah, lots of points on grabs, a lot of shuffling up as well, with some of our leaders not joining, so that really puts this championship a lot closer. So it's now sort of back to anyone's game for the pole position of that going into the next few rounds.
Indeed it is. And talking about those rounds, round 4 will take place at Suzuka on May the 10th, round 5 at Silverstone on May the 17th, and then the final round taking place at Spa on May the 24th. So join us on Mondays for more Porsche Cup action. We have a crazy amount of racing taking place here at Racing Club International. So if you're not part of the Discord, I urge you to join, urge you to get involved in the racing. If you want to get involved in the stewarding or broadcasting or the commentary side, you can join up We've got positions open for all that want to join, and you don't have to be ultra talented to do what we do here, but we've got some good friendly staff and some guidelines that will, we're happy to coach you along. So thank you so much for joining us. Thanks for all the likes and support out on the YouTube stream tonight. It's been an absolute pleasure. My name is George Smith, joined in the box by Ryan Mawson. We had Ryan Gill on the cameras. So thank you for joining us, and we will see you all in a bit.
Ta-ra for now.